I kind of had to redo my system because my whole thing was like tiers. Like, okay, well, this tier has a good win and no struggle losses, and then this team, has no good wins, but they have it. Well, it seemed like every team in that first tier struggled. Washington scored one offensive touchdown against Arizona State. Texas and Oklahoma were both pushed to the brink by bad Big 12 teams, which is saying something because the Big 12 is bad this year. So if you're a bad team in a bad conference, it's a bad time. Coming off of a bye week to both of them. Of course, teams like Penn State picking up a loss. And I guess Georgia kept rolling. So I just kind of switched it to these are the teams that I think are just the best right now, excluding Ohio State. They're still in that lone tier. Where it's like they have good wins and they haven't really struggled against anybody. But after Ohio State, I just think these teams are the best. It is what it is.
See, you say that, and then you have Florida State who beat Duke by 20 essentially at 10. So
that game wasn't as lopsided as I think
it was. It was close for a while, but the final score is the final score.
Well, yeah. When the only way you can beat a team is because their quarterback goes out. I mean,
well, it's not the first game he's gotten hurt in. Duke wanted to use that excuse when he got hurt against Notre Dame. Protect him better, or don't get hurt.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the big reason why I think Florida State's ahead of Duke in my rankings. I'm glad that we cleared that up. I didn't think we'd have to, but
it's weird that I don't see Clemson anywhere on your guys' rankings.
No, dude, Clemson stinks.
Much as, they do. Oh, yeah. Darn.
Yeah, I was wrong. I was wrong. Clemson stinks. Dabo stinks. Clay Klubnik stinks.
Yeah. Tyler stinks. You stink.
Yeah.
Whatever. So North Carolina, your guys' other ACC favorite. What happened to them this weekend?
Well, it's funny because
they lost a tough one, but they can still come back and beat the shit out of that shitty team.
Sure.
Well, because last week I had put North Carolina in my top 10. I'm like, man, I probably should have put Louisville in there. It didn't matter. The whole conference is garbage. So that's on me. I gave the ACC too much credit.
Well, they're going to have a national champion this year, so.
Yeah. We'll see about that. As long as Florida State doesn't have to play Oregon State, Alabama, Oregon, Penn State, Oklahoma, Washington, Georgia, Michigan, or Ohio State, they're in real good shape to win a national championship.
You just named 10 wins for them.
All right. Let's see. I'm trying to think of any other. It's still weird because it's like I don't. I guess now we're kind of getting to the point where we're seeing teams actually get to play other good teams. So,
real quick, obviously talking about the big game, the biggest game that happened this weekend, Ohio State, Penn State. I think I finally have a grasp on this Ohio State team now. I think their defense may be they are one of the best in the nation, if not number one. But their offense is the offense of an 8-4 team that gets bailed out by that defense time and time again because their defense is just so salty. And I wanted to believe Drew Aller was the guy to finally knock him down a peg, but he completed 30% of his passes, and he looked much to the effect of Heinrich Harburg. So very much out on this Penn State team, although I do think their defense is good as well.
Yeah, I think it's crazy because that is the biggest game of this weekend. It's been 33 minutes. We haven't brought it up once. We talked about Iowa for 15 minutes.
It was just
not even the best team in the state of Iowa, but oh boy, I forgot where I was going with that. Oh yeah, Penn State, Ohio State. Yeah, I think you're right, and I think it's an interesting kind of transition. Now, granted, when you go from C.J. Stroud to Kyle McCord, you don't really have much of a choice in this, but it seems like they're taking the kind of approach that I thought that Michigan took when they finally elevated. Like, we don't give a shit about having the best players or having the flashiest recruiting rankings. We just want to build a tough team that can beat Ohio State. Now I feel like it's kind of on the other end. It was like, okay, well, we've shown that we can compete with Georgia. We can show that we can beat any other team in the country. Ryan Day hasn't lost to another Big Ten team outside of Michigan. Like, all right, I want this team to be tough and big and strong enough just to beat Michigan. We'll figure the rest out later. God forbid we get a draw like Michigan and TCU last year. But that kind of feels like the formula to me is like, okay, well, we're getting tossed up by JJ McCarthy, and they didn't even have Blake Corum last year, but just getting tossed up. We got to be tougher. Granted, when we play SEC teams who don't play defense, we can kind of air it out and shoot them up a bit, but we got to toughen up against Michigan. And I don't know if that's just coincidence, just because they do go from C.J. Stroud to Kyle McCord, and that's just how this team looks. But that's kind of my best case scenario for Ohio State.
I do have a question for Brooke. No judgment here. I'm just asking your honest opinion. As your ranking is set, do you truly believe that Florida State is better than Michigan and Georgia?
No, I just do it to spite you guys.
Okay, that's what I figured that was the case, but I just figured I'd clear that up.
I think Michigan, if I had to pick one team, is far and away the best team in the country this year.
Mm-hmm.
I think Georgia is probably the second best, but no Brock Bowers this year. I might slide Florida State into that 2 spot right now, but I was going to ask you guys this, but I'll go first. If the season ended today just off the eyeball test of who I think are the best 4 teams, this is going to sound crazy, but I think the best 4 teams are Michigan, Georgia, Florida State, and Oregon. And I know they lost to Washington, but that Oregon team, watching them just run the ball down Wazoo's throat. Wazoo played pretty well for being on the road and a 20-point dog. And Wazoo kind of got up on them early, but there was no flinch. And if Oregon just kicks field goals instead of going for it on 4th down every time, they beat Washington. But neither here nor there. But what do you guys think? Who are the 4 best teams as it stands right now?
Yeah, I think, as you said, I think Michigan is like another level above everybody else right now. I can see what you're saying with Florida State and Georgia being kind of interchangeable, because while they are Georgia still, there are some questions that haven't been answered yet. So I do those 2 and 3. I really like what Washington has going on. Their offense is great, and their defense is really solid as well. But again, I hate playing the fence like this. But I also agree with what you're saying about Oregon. But the way that they just cannibalize each other every year is so fucking frustrating. But going with my gut, I'd go Washington number 3 or number 4 rather.
Yeah, it's interesting phrasing. It's very specific phrasing, because the 4 best teams, I would put Michigan. Well, by the way, to defend Michigan, I hear the sentiment, oh, they haven't played anybody. Yeah, and they've looked like that they haven't played anybody, because they've rolled everybody. They shut out Michigan State, who's a Power 5 football team. I think they shut out another Big Ten team. They should have shut out Nebraska, to be honest.
Yeah, shout out Josh Fleeks.
Yeah, shout out Josh Fleeks, hero, getting him a statue in the parking lot. Oh my gosh, what a disaster that would have been. But they've looked like the best team by a mile on every field that they've been on. You know, it's like the Nuggets winning the championship last year. People say, "Oh, well, you played the 7th seed and the 8th seed." Yeah, and they blew them out. They swept the Lakers. They won in 5 games in every other series. They look like the better team, and I think that's the same thing with Michigan. Is that's just a competition. They look like they're playing a different sport. Florida State and Georgia, 2 and 3 interchangeable. I'm not a fan of Georgia's resume to this point, but that's not the question. The question was who's the best. So you do have to put them in there. By the way, I do think it's funny that all 3 of us have Florida State, not where we think that they should be, but just because we want to spite each other. I think that's very funny. And I'm very happy about that. I was really trying to find a way to keep them out of my top 10, but they're just really, what am I going to do? Put Utah in there? And then that 4th spot, if we're doing just the teams that I've seen with my eyeballs that are the best teams, Oregon looks awesome. I don't think that they have a real fault. They've rolled the bad teams. They probably should have beat Washington. Granted, and this wasn't the question, but I don't think that they would deserve to be in the top 4 over Washington, of course, or even above Oklahoma.
Just what
But
you gut feeling. What do you think?
my eyeballs say that Oregon's the fourth best team in the country.
I'm just not in love with the two Big 12 teams, Texas and Oklahoma. I feel like they beat up on a conference that has a lot of bottom feeders, and they don't look like the other top 10 teams in my eyes.
I mean, they both came really close to losing against other not so great Big 12 opponents.
This time last week, I probably do put Oklahoma above Oregon, but that was a real stinker.
Yeah, and we got to get over. They did win because that's the name of the game. Is just winning the game on your schedule. You're not going to blow out everyone unless maybe you're Michigan. You know, every top 10 team does have one or two of those, or hopefully just one of those games where they let a team that's not on their level play even with them for 3 quarters, but they don't look the part for me as far as playoff teams.
Yeah. So that's an interesting question. But we do have some, speaking of playoffs, I did update some. Whoops, we don't want to talk about Heisman yet. That's next episode. Okay, so here's what our playoff would look like as is. 4 teams, top 4 ranked teams, Michigan, Ohio State. Also, side note, in our rankings, Ohio State and Georgia tied. They had the same amount of points. I gave Ohio State the bump because they were higher in our 3 rankings, and it was the AP who had Georgia significantly ahead of them. Well, I guess they finished 2 and 3, so it doesn't much matter for the playoff. But that's, a little bit insight on the rankings. And then I think Michigan Washington would be an outstanding football game. I would love that. Then Ohio State Georgia rematch would be pretty fun.
So just going off these 4 teams, in my perfect world here, it would be Washington versus Georgia and Michigan versus Georgia and Washington versus Ohio State. Because then you truly, I don't know, it feels a little more even that way for those semifinal games. In a weird way, like I would never be able to describe why that feels better, but in my brain it feels better.
Yeah, I think so too. I think, and this isn't the same Ohio State team as years past, but it feels like we would get more of a shootout, Washington and Ohio State, where Michigan and Georgia would be a defensive slugfest. So that's what would be appealing to me if, CJ Stroud was still a Buckeye.
This isn't your grandpa's Ohio State team, though. This is a defensive team now.
Yeah.
That they're going to have to grind their way out on defense. So, and that's what you get in 3 of the 4 of these teams. The odd man out is kind of Washington with the better offense. And I think really in any of these 3 matchups for Washington, they would probably get beat pretty handedly.
Yeah. Which I think does make up for, if we get it, if things, continue to go the way, like another matchup with Washington and Oregon in the Pac-12 championship, with Oregon with just the 1 loss, Washington undefeated. I mean, I was so disappointed with the conference championship games last year. That in and of itself, I don't even care what happens in the other 4 conferences. That's awesome. Sign me up for that every time.
Yeah. And then plus the way I said, that means that we are guaranteed to finally see Michigan versus Georgia. Yeah, I want to see that game so bad.
Yeah.
I think that would be one of the best college football games of all time.
Oh, man.
Well, Michigan should have been there last year, but they couldn't get past the Council Bluffs kid.
Yeah. Couldn't get past the Texas Christian University Horned Frogs. What a disaster that was. How fun was that?
Real quick. Oh, wait. I'll say that for our Heisman talk, so go ahead.
Oh, yeah. But also, if we were in a 12-team playoff, here's what that would look like, which I don't see. I mean, a miss here. Ohio State Air Force would be kind of funky.
So much better. That one would be a disaster. That game would be an absolute disaster.
Yeah.
But everything else on this board, gets me a little tight in the pants.
I'm typically against rematches. I don't like Georgia, Alabama a couple years ago. I just saw this game 2 weeks ago. I don't want to watch this again. Yeah. Granted, it turned out to be an all-time caliber national championship game. So what do I know? But a Texas Alabama rematch, where Alabama fights back for the rest of the season. Texas, either dominates the Big 12 or just finishes second fiddle to a rising Oklahoma team. That would get me excited.
And this is why I understand the 12-team playoff, but out of those first 4 matchups, the quarterfinals, I believe Oregon would shit down Ole Miss's throat. Florida State would beat Utah by 3 touchdowns. Ohio State would fist fuck Air Force.
No way you actually believe that.
What?
Florida State beating Utah by 3 touchdowns?
Absolutely.
You got to score 3 touchdowns against the Utah defense first.
I was going to say their offense is kind of bad.
Caleb Williams just put up 32 on him.
Well, that's
he's Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
actually, no. Some of a lot of those.
Notre Dame just held them to 20, but
one was a pick 6. Right. Or did Caleb Williams actually have 3 touchdowns? I'm not familiar with the game stats.
Yeah, they scored 4 I think 4.
Okay. I remember one was a pick 6 and I think one was like a punt return. But I see what you're saying. I think Utah's defense is so good that I think they could keep them in the game by themselves. 3 touchdowns, it to me just seems like a little bit of a stretch. But I do think Florida State would win that game. But I think
hold on.
Is a bit.
You're telling me Oregon State can shit on them, but Florida State would not.
It's like the Pac-12, like just cannibalizing itself. For some reason, when they play each other, I think they both just go down to the same level. And then when they play other conferences, they actually get up for it. I don't know. It's hard to describe. But.
I do think it is worth mentioning that I do think it's more likely that Oregon State or even UCLA could sneak into this playoff before I think Utah would finish out strong enough.
If UCLA got in, I would really throw up.
Because what, USC has 2 losses now?
Yeah.
To Utah.
2 losses.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I don't think UCLA would be in it. I'm just thinking who else in the Pac-12 could get after it. And
Oregon State,
sure. Yeah.
Oregon State maybe, but I don't feel too good. But I do think that does, set up the fact that okay, well now we do really get the 4 best teams in the playoff, where if TCU had to get through a team like USC last year before they played Michigan, I think that maybe that ends up a little bit differently, and Michigan and USC would have been a good game, and I don't know how exactly it would have shaped up, but I think if the whole end game is to have the best 4-team playoff, which this current system doesn't do typically, I think this is the best path for that. And then I think it also does give some type of credibility to those teams, even like Ole Miss or Utah in this situation, or the loser of Texas Bama, that, hey, we, this is an accomplishment. We did make it to the college football playoff. We did have a very successful season. Now we can capture this momentum where if Texas is playing in the Alamo Bowl, then who fucking cares? So I think that's the value there.
I think we got to get away from saying let's have the best 4-team playoff and say the most deserving, because like Nick Saban was bitching about last year, he was like, well, we have 2 losses, but Vegas thinks we're better than some of these teams in here. Well, you lost 2 games. It doesn't matter what Vegas thinks. It's what you go out and prove and what you go out and earn. Like Michigan is far and away better football team last year than TCU, but TCU beat them.
Yep.
So
yeah, you're right.
I just
right, that is such a pet peeve.
Best teams. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the 4 most deserving teams.
Yeah. But it gives those teams an opportunity to earn their way in, because Michigan, Washington, Oklahoma, and Georgia, in this scenario before conference championships, they earn that spot by winning their conference. They're the 4 best conference champions. Then you have teams like Oregon and presumably Florida State, presumably Utah, or presumably Ohio State. Then now they earn their way in. So I think that it sets up for a better semifinal, even whether it's the 4 best teams or what should be the 4 most deserving teams. I think that's absolutely a win, and I can't wait for it.
Yeah, but then you have teams like Air Force getting in. Like,
Well, good on them, man. That's awesome.
yeah, I mean, maybe they deserve it if they win their conference, whatever. But
Yeah, and I mean, well, and now
it's
granted,
such a
Air
shit
Force
conference.
this year probably isn't the best example, and it's a little bit different now that those 4 teams are now in the Big 12. But like when you do have a team like UCF or Cincinnati, who is far and above better than all the other Group of 5 schools, they should get their chance, And
Yeah,
it's such a shitty thing if college football gets more fractured to where it is now, where the Group Power 5 is the NFL and Group of 5 is FCS football. I think any opportunity to kind of blend those 2 areas of college football, I think, is better for the product as a whole.
and I
This
think
year,
I'm just more so saying that because I watched LSU just kill the Army. Like, what was it, 38-0 at at halftime or
Well,
something? It
yeah, but
was
LSU's full of a bunch of terrorists. They obviously hate America. Have some respect.
yeah.
this year, I'd have to say the best Group of 5 team is either James Madison or Tulane.
Which is bullshit. Fuck the NCAA.
Yeah.
Let the Dukes in. Let the Dukes play. It's fucking bullshit.
Well, I mean, no matter who it is, I think they would get curb stomped by Ohio State. But
Yeah, but still, 2 straight years of great ball that they're playing, and they don't even get to have the chance to get blown out.
Yeah.
well,
Is that nothing? And like I said, I mean, that would be a huge boost for a team like JMU if they got in. We talk about how, I mean, I don't know what kind of a boost an academy school like Air Force could get. So they don't do things the same way as everybody else. But JMU, yeah, even if they do make the playoff and get shit pumped by Ohio State, that's incredible. That's
Yeah.
such a big boost for them. You get all those eyeballs on your TV on your football program. You get to the university gets to benefit from it by their advertising of it. I mean, it's such a big deal to make the college football playoff that, yeah, I think JMU would and any Group of 5 schools should gladly volunteer to get shit canned in round 1 in Columbus.
I think there needs to be like a criteria though for some of these Group of 5 schools, just because if you look at Air Force's schedule, they absolutely should go 12-0 because they're going to be favored in every game. Where a team like Tulane, I understand they lost by 17 to Ole Miss, but Ole Miss is now ranked 12, and Tulane was without their starting quarterback. And like you guys point out, it was 2020 heading into the fourth quarter where, and they beat USC last year in a New Year's Six bowl game.
Yeah.
So that has to count for something too.
And I do think that at the end of the season, this will shape up where if Tulane does go undefeated the rest of the way, they win the American Conference, which is objectively at least has been a much better conference than the Mountain West. So they probably do get in, or they probably do get that highest ranked conference champion delegation. At least they should. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
Absolutely.
But yeah, and this would look totally different if we fast forwarded to conference champions, because both Texas and Oklahoma aren't getting in here. Probably not, at least. Alabama would have 2 losses, likely. Florida State would be higher than they are, probably. We have an opportunity for Oregon to get in instead of Washington. If not, they have 2 losses. So Utah's going to have a few losses. So yeah, it's all to be determined. But I mean, I still think this is the way to do it.
Yeah, it's fun to talk about.
Yeah. Well, perfect, fellas. Anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up for the evening?
That's all.
Well, perfect. We got more Cornhusker Connection coming your way here this week. We obviously have Go Big 12 or Go Big Home, Bookybrook, and the boys return. It was a good week for a couple of us. The last time that we got our bets in, so outstanding stuff. We'll be back. Go Big Red.
Go Big Red.
Go Big Red.